met some of you already. Just to remind you, I'm Vice President for Institutional Advancement at Moore. Welcome to Alumni Reunion. Today's panel is part of our overall day of welcoming alumni back. And even though we hope to see you in person, I have to say it is just as wonderful to see all of you, both your faces and your name in our participant list online. So thank you for joining us. So it's my pleasure, as we are celebrating the 10th anniversary of the MA in Art Education program, Lynn, I'm sure time flies when you're having fun, huh? To introduce you to Lauren Stichter, Moore's Assistant Professor, Director, and Graduate Program Director of Art Education. Prior to coming to Moore, Lauren taught at the Pennsylvania School for the Deaf for 14 years. Her many accomplishments are impressive. Notably, she's an active organizer, lecturer on emerging topics in the art education field for the Kennedy Center's Office of VSA in Washington, D.C., as well as the lead organizer of the Second International Disability Studies and Art Education Conference hosted at Moore in the fall of 2019. And this conference was attended by more than 400 artists, educators, researchers, and scholars. So thank you, Lauren. So in addition to her reputation and accolades in the field of art education, she's an active ceramic artist and an occasional guest curator at the Circle Gallery in Fishtown neighborhood of Philadelphia. On a personal note, Lauren, we would be remiss. Moore's academic dean, Patty Phillips, says, and I quote, "Lauren is truly one of the kindest, most thoughtful, smart, and compassionate people I've ever met. She's a joy to work with." And for those of you who know Lauren, I think we can all agree. So without further ado, Lauren, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Liz, so very much for that introduction. That was really amazing. Hello, everyone. My name is Lauren Stichter, and again, I'm the Director of Art Education here at Moore College of Art and Design. I oversee our undergraduate, postbaccalaureate, and graduate programs. And as Liz mentioned, we have a very unique graduate program, the Master's in Art Education, with an emphasis in special populations. I'd like to welcome Lynne Horoschak, our emeritus faculty member, also my predecessor who originated this program for us here at Moore, and our panelists, current student Hannah Swanson, an alum Kat Lee, San Valentin, Samantha Varian, Alex Montgomery, and Sarah Boland. Thank you all for being here today. And thank you, alum and friends and family who've joined us for this conversation. So before we start, I just want to pause. The group kind of talked a little bit. We just want to pause for a moment and acknowledge the events of this week and the centuries worth of oppression and violence against those from the Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. In response to this, Moore continues to state, we condemn all racism in all forms, especially acts of violence that take precious human lives from us too soon. Several of us attended this amazing conference this past week called Adding Voices. It's a quick, amazing resource. It is a group of art educators of color. The conference was run by them, and we got to hear from a lot of really amazing speakers there. We don't have enough art educators of color in the field, and so I think this is a great place to start. If you're on Instagram, you can also follow them at Adding Voices. So just a little bit of how the flow of the day is going to go. This is different than a Zoom meeting. If you'll notice, we can't all see each other at the moment. You can see the panelists, but know that we cannot see the attendees. We can see some of the chat that's going on the side. Again, feel free to chat with each other. I'm sure there are some folks who are reuniting in this moment. Along the way, too, as we go through our webinar, Laura, who's helping us facilitate this event, is going to capture some of the questions that you have. So if you have a question in the moment, throw it in there. Laura's going to document it, and we will respond to some of those questions at the end. We're also going to offer a time of dialogue to hear from you all, too, because you're all in the field doing the same work that we're doing. Let's see. In a moment, I'm going to introduce Lynne Horoschak, and then she will go on to introduce our panel members. We're going to spend a little time reflecting on what we've learned here at Moore so far. It's only been about 90 days that we've been working online as art educators. And so we're simply sharing what we've learned so far. We know there is still very much to learn. And then we'll discuss what we hope to learn moving forward. And then again, we'll offer some time for all of us, attendees included, to dialogue, have a few questions. And then if you are trying to get Act 48 or professional development hours, Laura is going to add a link to a Google form at the end. You just fill that out and we will send you a letter in the next 30 days. So we're just going to go ahead and get started here. And I'm going to turn this over to Lynne to introduce herself and then introduce the panel members.
What a great photograph. Hi, I'm Lynne Horoschak. I'm an art teacher. With kids with special needs before there were any resources or books or adapted strategies. So I started making my strategies and adaptations and abilities who couldn't speak or noise and did communicate. And that was really exciting for me to see how they responded to art when we all got it. So that led me to think that maybe we need a graduate program, and I based the program on my taken this program and pushed it and have thrived all over. It's just been really great for me to see. I want to also thank the panel and all the grad students that have gone through the program. I couldn't be more proud of you. Just couldn't be more proud. Thank you. That goes for you too, Lauren. I'm proud of you. It's wonderful how you just took the program and just improved it. So thank you. Very grateful. And welcome to everybody else that's out there. I hope you can participate in this near the end. Okay, so I'm going to call each panelist by your name, and then if you would just respond to that questionnaire up there, that one, yes. Hannah Swanson.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for letting us be on here today. My name is Hannah, and I use they, them pronouns. I'm about to graduate this year in August of 2020. The title of my thesis, this is actually my first panel too, so I'm very excited. My title of my thesis is Art Educators in the Creation of Gender Variant Inclusive Practices in the Art Classroom, a close look at inclusion through pedagogy. And I started my first teaching position in January at Fairwell Academy. We are a K-12 approved private school for students with emotional behavior needs, autism, and intellectual disabilities. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. I can't wait to hear your thesis presentation. Kat Lee, please.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kat Lee. I use she, her, and hers pronouns. I graduated in 2018, and the title of my thesis was Teacher-Learner Collaboration. How can artistic identity and confidence development grow within young adolescent females with learning disabilities? I currently work at Malvern Preparatory School, but while I was conducting my thesis, I actually worked at Woodland School, which is a K-12 school that serves students with learning differences.
Wonderful. Thank you. Allison Valentin.
Hey everyone, I'm Alison Valentin. I use they, them pronouns. I graduated 2019. The title of my thesis was LGBTQ, Our Teachers' Practices and Impact on Self-Identification for LGBTQ Students. I've been an early childhood educator for 10 years. I was at Moonstone Preschool. It's an art-based preschool here in South Philly. And interesting story, I left that position and took a temp position at Penn Charter for their arts integration pre-K program. And then the pandemic hit. So I've been, my entire time at Penn Charter has been online.
Great. Thanks. Samantha Varian.
Hi, everyone. I'm Samantha Varian. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated from the Moore Graduate Program in 2016. My thesis was choosing creatively choice-based art education for inclusive classrooms. And I focused on supporting student need in an inclusive classroom using choice-based practices. I currently teach 6th through 8th grade in Bucks County and Centennial School District at Klinger Middle School. Yeah.
Thanks, Sam. Alex Montgomery. Hi.
Hey everyone, I'm Alex Montgomery. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated in 2018 and the title of my thesis was Anxiety Reducing Drawing Activities in Secondary Education, and it focused on the most effective drawing materials and just warm-up activities that could help students loosen up and become less stressed and anxious at the beginning of the period. And I currently work as a high school educator at New Foundations Charter School in Northeast Philadelphia.
Thank you. Sarah Boland.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Boland. I use she, her pronouns. I graduated in 2019, and the title of my thesis was Social and Emotional Learning, Developing Positive Relationships for Students with Emotional and Behavioral Disorders in an Inclusive Art Room. I was focusing on kind of building relationships with the emotional support students throughout the entire school and with myself. My current position is elementary art teacher at Hillcrest Elementary in Upper Darby School District. My building also hosts 2 extra programs through the school district, their life skills program and their emotional support program, which means I have a very wide range of students and needs and abilities.
Good. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, so panel, when you consider the universal design for learning strategies that you learned here at Moore for reaching and teaching kids with special needs, how are you applying that knowledge now on online instruction? So let's start with classroom culture. Kat, what do you think? Would you start us off?
Sure. When I transitioned into this virtual setting, I really took the idea of universal design and looked at it through a lens of opportunity. How many opportunities can I give my students to engage with myself, with their school community, and with each other? And so there are a couple things that I tried to do from the beginning, others I added throughout the process to create that classroom culture. One of the things was to validate what they had at home so that they didn't feel like they were in competition with each other in terms of materials. So we did a scavenger hunt of all these materials that they had available at home. I gave examples like aluminum foil, plastic bags, boxes, cardboard, anything that would not necessarily typically be found in a studio space. And we tried to, in addition to the materials, I really thought about how can we create this idea of a classroom and the idea of really connecting with each other online. And that was very difficult. The way I did it was I used Padlet, if you guys are familiar with it. It's a submission program that if you have a subscription, it's completely free to your students, which was really helpful. They're able to download that onto their phones. And my students actually said it was a lot easier for them to access it through their cell phones, which was really nice to hear. And it works very similarly like Instagram. So it's a format that they're already very comfortable with. They can like an image if that is what they feel comfortable sharing with their peers. They can leave comments. And I really tried to use that as a way to kind of mimic the classroom, the physicality of a classroom. And I think that also gave them access to each other's work. And I really wanted to make sure in terms of classroom culture that the culture isn't happening between me and the student, but really between the students together themselves. And Padlet worked as a great way. I know some other art teachers used Flipgrid to do the same thing. And I know actually a DEI coordinator at a different school uses House Party, which is a phone app, I don't know how he applied it, but he used it with his students and he said it was very successful. And also this understanding of why we're doing artwork, right? So like, why are we continuing to do this during this time? So I really try to emphasize that within every one of my activities and projects that I shared with my students during that time.
Good. Thank you. Allison, do you have anything to add to that?
Like Kat, I wanted to emphasize that art was something that does not have to happen in the art classroom. It is something that happens in our everyday lives and pretty much all the time. And in particular with my age group, I had my majority of my experiences have been with pre-K and preschool. So I really centralized play and experience when I brought the classroom to online. And essentially the classroom became their homes. And I just want to emphasize, like, you know, some students have like a specific like table or desk and have specific supplies. And I just pushed like at all the activities that I shared with them. I gave examples of how you can do this in a specific art setting, be like a little corner or a table, but then you can take this and maybe while you are playing with blocks, while you're doing some water play outside, this is how you can contextualize it for that. And I also thought about, Kat had mentioned like relationships. I believe that the parents kind of had to become teachers. So I also had to consider what kind of biases about what a teacher is and what they do, especially art teachers, and just model for the parents as well, how this can be done, how art is something that we do and not necessarily make the product is just an evidence of this process. And it really is the experience about making it and the thought processes that come along with that. So I did pre-recorded videos that were released 3 times a week. And so I had to model for parents as well as students, all the several options, all the different tools, the different environments these are, and just really pushing, this is something that you do. And it's something you can do together, or it's something that you can encourage your child through just prompting and making connections. An example I can think of, especially in terms of varying needs and abilities, anything that involved cutting. 4s and 5s, small motor is something that they are working on. Some have mastered it. Some we're still working on it. So I had to, anything that involved cutting, I had to model, okay, this is how we cut. You can draw a line and follow the line. You can have a grown-up draw the line and you can cut along that line, or you can rip it controlled, and this is how you can do it. So just like really emphasizing play and experience and bringing art out of the classroom and into something we do every day without diminishing the art classroom.
Exactly. Good. Thanks a lot. Hannah, you have some thoughts on the subject?
Yeah, absolutely. So my experience transitioning into online learning was really interesting because I wasn't allowed to do any like live teaching. So I really, like, when I sat down before we started Google Classroom, I really thought about, okay, how do I transition and make that transition consistent between when I'm teaching in the classroom versus teaching in online instruction. And like what Al did, I did a lot of like videos, and that was kind of like my way to like keep things consistent. Like I still had students always do a do now. And then my video would like address that, and then we would kind of move on to the activities. And I think that was really helpful, especially for my kids, to just like see my face and to joke around with them and to know that I'm still here and I still care about them. But again, my kids, a lot of my kids don't have a whole lot of access to materials. So it became, a way to like, how do you experience your home in a different way with the materials that you have? So for example, at the first week, when I was just trying to assess to see what kids have, we did assemblages with found objects. And that was like one of those moments that surprised me about how many different ways kids could approach that. Cause I explained what assemblages are and I kind of just let them go. And everyone's was so different. So after that week, I wanted to make sure that I kind of gave everyone a little bit of choice. So I would kind of give a broad idea or a topic or an artist or a technique. And then I would let students kind of choose how they wanted to experiment with that. And I think that made things also like alleviate a little bit of stress from parents as well, especially for my little guys, because they're all of a sudden are becoming a teacher. So I wanted to do that as well, if that makes sense. So It was good. It was very fun to experiment with those things. So thank you, Lynn.
Sounds great. Thank you. Thanks. So let's have some thoughts on lesson planning. You already touched on a couple, but how about Sarah? Would you get us started on lesson planning?
Sure. Kind of building off of a lot of what other people were saying, where I knew that a lot of my students might not have materials, parents who are essential workers and weren't going to be able to get materials or really work one-on-one with their children as much as they have liked. I approached my lesson planning for online of really thinking about encouraging my students to make something every week. And that no matter what they made, it was going to be gorgeous and I was going to love it. And I was going to post it onto my page for everyone else to see. And kind of like Hannah said, rather than giving them specific steps every week to be following, it was, I was focusing instead on prompts and trying to kind of expand their idea of what materials they could possibly be using and find in their home. And in addition, kind of because I have a wide range of learners, making sure like other people have said that they can see my face, that it's not just a list of possibilities, but that they're seeing me talk about it and be excited about it and really look forward to seeing what they're going to make by the end of that week. I really enjoyed the process of watching the students that I know from my classroom often be very timid or concerned about the choices they make. And by the end of this 3-month process, really opening up and expanding and really exploring what they can do, knowing that I was going to be supportive and happy just because they were making and that they were telling me about it.
Great. Terrific. Al, do you want to add to that?
Yes, I'm kind of excited because it sounds like a lot of us have established some like very similar strategies during this. I drew a lot from what the classroom teachers were doing. So we were able to view each other's content before it was released to families, like about a week before. So I was able to review, and instead of like reinventing the wheel, I just like look at what they were doing and see how art can expand upon what lessons they wanted their students to learn. And I think that also supported the idea of different learners and how we all learn different ways. And some of us learn writing by writing, and some of us will learn writing through art. And we had used Seesaw to have students submit their work. And I told families from the beginning, it does not have to be my lessons. Any kind of art making they do, please submit it to me. And I found that I would say 30% of images that I got were of students working. So I really took that and emphasized. I also want to mention that I would take all their submissions and compile them pretty much into a slideshow with my voiceover, specifically isolating certain behaviors and pointing that out. And then I would see that reflected in the following week's submissions. Students will feel inspired by each other. And I would just build off. It would just kind of build off of each other each week. And I would emphasize, right, this is the behavior I'm seeing. And this is how one student handled it. And this is how another student handled it. And look, it's completely different, but it's the same behavior. And I also, the way I structured my videos was also like establishing a certain focus. So it wasn't too open that students didn't know what to do, because sometimes too many choices can leave a student overwhelmed. So I found that basing it off of the classroom teacher's lessons, it's their prior knowledge. They already have an idea of what the focus is and establish just that boundary. So we're all together in one thing, one focus, but then it can be contextualized through these different abilities and different environments and different family situations.
Good. Yeah, good. Alex, what's your experience?
So to piggyback on a lot of what my peers have already been saying, a lot of my lessons at the beginning knowing that a lot of my students didn't have access to materials at home, I wanted them to be more focused on exercising their creative problem solving skills and just their creativity and their ability to, kind of make the most of what they had available to them. So I also wasn't necessarily looking for my students' projects to be the most beautiful thing in the world either. I just wanted to see that they were really trying and being creative with what they had. I gave my students a lot of prompts to choose from week to week. And I think that giving them some choice in what they were making art about really helped. So I created a bunch of choice boards for my students, depending on the subject that they had me for. So I teach 4 different subjects at my school. So I had choice boards for each different subject and just tried to give them a range of options. All of the prompts kind of required little to no materials at all. For my 3D projects, we did like a couple variations of assemblage sculptures. We did shadow sculptures, which were super fun, and the kids really enjoyed those as well. I gave them a couple of prompts where all you really needed was some cardboard and maybe some tape, but gave them options on how, if you didn't have access to tape or glue, here's something that you can do instead. Junk sculptures, which are super fun, just using whatever like recycled bottles or anything that you have around the house. And a lot of like recycled material based projects. And with each prompt, I tried to pair an artist with a contemporary artist or with that project so that they could see that there are artists out there in the world who actually work this way as well, so that they could kind of wrap their head around the idea of using alternative materials and methods and how there are artists out there who are really doing that. And for my 2D classes, I'm sure a lot of art teachers I know were using like the found object color wheel prompt. I had like drawing from live feeds from zoos and aquariums. Visual journaling was great as well. I asked my students a lot to kind of just create drawings that were based on their experiences throughout the pandemic or how their day-to-day has been. So to give them some time to kind of reflect on what's going on in the world as well. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Yeah, good. Sam, how about you?
So for my experience teaching online, I had very specific requirements that I had to hit, which some districts had to. And I had to make sure that I was posting a lesson for students to work on that they could work on for 15 to 30 minutes per day. So I tried to make my lessons as open-ended as possible, but long-term assignments. So I teach on a day 1, day 2 schedule. So students that had me on day 1 will do a project, and then the next day I'll have day 2 students, and they'll repeat. So basically, I really focused on making sure that my lessons expanded for long periods of time, but I chunked the information for students so that they were working on small portions at a time, that they could really focus on what materials they have. And if you're drawing an example of balance or you're creating an example of balance, you can use any types you'd like. These are a variety of examples. How can you make that? How can you think outside of the box? But it all comes together with one final product that look amazing. Some of them, it blew my mind when they come in, and it just amazes you, and it's awesome. But for me, lesson planning, I think I really wanted to make sure that I still was meeting the needs of all my learners. So planning on having video examples, drawing. In my classroom, I have visual step guides that I hand draw for every lesson, still including them for some of my projects so they can see all the steps. Showing examples of if they're doing blind continuous line contour drawings to block your view, that they can put their pencil through a piece of paper or paper plate. Really making sure that I'm having the visual steps, the audio steps, the video examples, and also physical examples. So making sure that I'm meeting the needs of all of my learners while guiding them slowly through project making processes. I also really wanted to make sure that they know, even though it's complete or incomplete in my school district, they were still getting marked incomplete or complete. So they had to complete the work, but making it something that they could have some choice in. Students are going to be more engaged if they have opportunities to make choices in their own art making. So giving them a platform of where, yes, we're making something specific, but you have but you can do it in your own way. If you have to create an example of form, I'm not going to tell you it has to look exactly like mine, but you can create it any way you'd like. So here's some examples, but don't copy mine. So it's really giving them lots of opportunity in that way.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Alex, would you give us a few examples of technology, some tips on technology?
Absolutely. When I was in the grad program at Moore, actually, the STEAM class was probably one of my favorite classes that we took. I'm always really excited about STEAM projects and incorporating like science and technology into my lessons when possible. So I learned a lot from really just free apps that you can use for lessons at home. And I've been using a couple of those with my lesson planning as well. I was exposed to Tinkercad while we were at Moore, and that's an awesome app. I'm very fortunate that my school has two kind of old, but they're functional 3D printers. So I'm able to use that. It's a free, just 3D sculpting and design web-based application that the students can just kind of sign up for an account with, and it's totally free. And it's really super easy and user-friendly. I taught myself how to use it quickly, and now I do a whole bunch of 3D printing lessons with my students. And I got a little bit more into like using digital drawing applications when I was at Moore as well. Autodesk Sketchbook is really great, and that's totally free as well. And I have a lot of students who use it. So if you have students who do have the ability to maybe download an application on their phone, but don't have a lot of like pencils and colored pencils and other traditional art materials at home, but they want to be able to work with color still, then that's like a really good option. A lot of my students also really love Procreate, which is a paid application, but it's according to them, it's amazing, and they like swear by it. I haven't used it myself, but they seem to really enjoy that application. There are some free stop motion applications that make making stop motions at home super easy as well. I've had some of my sculpture students submit just some short stop motion animations since we've started virtual learning. They were doing object-based stop motion, so you don't really need any materials other than the free application, and you can just use whatever you have lying around the house to animate something. And I really like iMotion and Stop Motion Studio, and a few of my students also used those applications as well. And I gave my students like a list of suggested applications for these things, and then they could kind of pick and play around with whatever they felt like worked for them. My school currently uses Canvas, but before we switched over to using Canvas, which is an online learning management system, we used Wix blog, like the Wix blog feature, to post a lot of our work when we were at Moore, and I used that for a year before we switched over to Canvas, and it was a really great way for the students to be able to post their work and then have a dialogue online and do like an online critique. Which I found was really effective for my students who might not be comfortable vocalizing their opinions in an in-person class discussion or even in like a virtual Zoom discussion. If they are given the opportunity to write about it, they were more likely to participate. So that was great for my students who were a little more anxious about talking. And since we've started using Canvas, Canvas has a discussion board feature, so I've been using that instead of Wix. And then one of the other things that I learned at Moore that was really exciting to me that I incorporated into my classroom, not necessarily great for a virtual classroom, but we learned about like paper circuitry and some other forms of incorporating engineering projects into your lessons. So I've been doing a paper circuit illuminated drawing lesson ever since I was exposed to that. And I do that every year. And my kids are always really excited by that project and look forward to doing it because they think it's like mind-blowingly awesome that you can make your drawings light up. And they're super easy to use, and it's not a terribly expensive project to do either. So, and they really enjoy it.
Wow. Okay, moving on. Thanks, Alex. Lauren, can you move this conversation from where we are now to where we're going to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Lynn. And I just want to say for a second, too, we are sharing a lot of information. We've also started working on a file that we're going to share with our attendees. So don't worry, anything that's been mentioned along the way, certainly write it down if that helps you remember things. But we are going to share a lovely file of documents and resources when we're done in an email to those who attended afterwards. And sorry about my slides earlier. I was so engaged in what everyone was saying. I forgot to push forward on the slides. But okay, here we go. On to what's next. So I'm going to ask the whole group this one, and we're going to look for about 4 people, all of our panelists, I should say. We're going to look about 4 panelists to respond to this. And so Moore's program, of course, encouraged you to continue your development as an artist and educator beyond graduation, as you have already exemplified. And I would imagine that the recent pandemic especially has stretched you as an educator in new ways. What have you learned over the last few weeks as you've helped your students transition to online learning? And I'm going to ask you to physically raise your hand if you'd like to respond to that. Yeah, go ahead, Lee. Kat, sorry. Saw your last name and said it first.
Sure. I almost keep forgetting to press that mute button. So
okay.
So I think something that definitely helped me and also made our school made it a priority to make this. So the idea of routine was very stressed by my school. All the teachers were told, make sure you set a clear, simple routine that our students can follow. And I know that when my school kind of said that to us, it helped me out personally. Okay, like if I set myself a routine, my students will get into it. We'll be meeting each other at the right time. And so what we did was I met my students twice a week, once either Monday and Tuesday, and then the second time either Thursday and Friday. They had Wednesday off. And that was called office hours. So they could come and contact teachers at whatever time during 8 through 3. But during our first meeting, I made sure to give them a space to speak to each other, not about art necessarily. So I had an hour to spend with my students. And when I opened up that Zoom classroom, I just asked, how are you guys doing? Where are you? What's something you're excited about? What did you do? How are you connecting with friends? Things like that. And I really just used that classroom space to give them a space to talk and reconnect. And what I realized is by doing that, I could kind of see where the students are at. And if I found that, you know, they really just need a moment to themselves after this discussion, I made sure, even prior to our first initial meeting for the week, that their lesson was posted on our school account via video and written language. So we didn't have to talk about that lesson during our meeting. It was available to them. So the students really did have the choice as to where that hour went, if that full hour was used, whatever they really needed. And setting a routine with them really did help transition them out from a physical school setting into this virtual space. Something that I also really started doing towards the end of my time virtual teaching is making sure that I posted the lessons, so the video and the text that I would have with my students, I didn't let that go live until we had our Zoom face-to-face meeting. And I started to do that very strategically because I realized my students were getting into this space of like, let's just get this done. Like, I just need to do it, check it off, done for the week. And I'm sure, you know, that was a collection of just anxiety, like, you know, the difficulty of managing their schedule by themselves at home, a collection of emotions that are happening. And so I made sure, you know, the Zoom lesson, and then had their assignment go live the second we left that Zoom space. In addition to doing that, I also did the lesson myself with the students, step by step. So going back to my thesis, Maxine Green was such an influence on my thesis, and being there and being with your students. I said, hey, I'm in this with you. If you're doing a sketch, I'm doing a sketch, and I'm doing it the time you're doing it. So there wasn't any preemptive thing that I really did with them. And the product that was made in the video was a completely different product that I submitted as I went along with my students. And so as I kept pace visually submitting on Padlet, my students kind of just mimicked and said, hey, Miss Lee has posted her sketch. Let me post my sketch. Miss Lee posted her model. Let me post my model. And that just helped us kind of transition out of like them seeing me do this physically in the classroom, and being with them as much as I can in this virtual space. Like, I am still a student too. I'm with you. I'm learning how to do this virtual thing with you. So we had some very candid conversations like, hey, can you hear me? Is my Zoom working? Like, how are you guys, how do I work the chat box? Like all this stuff they were so fluent in. And they helped me out a lot too. So just kind of breaking down that hierarchy of like teacher and student, right? Like we're really going through this together.
Yeah.
And parents are involved too. Al, you said that, like parents are now a part of our very live learning experience. So I think we're just kind of rebuilding and reestablishing what this hierarchy of education is.
Great. Thanks, Kat. Maybe 2 or 3 more folks. Al, would you mind?
Just emphasizing what Kat said about having structure. I got to do 1 live studio class a week, and it was for about 20 minutes, and I always went over. And I found out quickly having a structure was really important. So for this age group, and I did art games because just for time, and I had about 15 to 20 students, 15 to 24 and 5-year-olds on Zoom who know how to unmute and use the chat feature. So just like reminding them, like, if this was the classroom, if this was your classroom teacher's room, would you be talking right now? Remember, we are keeping ourselves on mute. The chat feature is almost like talking while the teacher's talking or while your friends are talking. So remember, this is just because you're at home and we're on the computer, like those classroom practices and those norms are still relevant. And I found that really mitigated those temptations pretty quickly. And also having the parents around, like, do I need to talk to your grown-ups? Do we have to have a conversation? So that was really interesting. Anyway, going back to the live classes, having the art games really provided that structure in terms of momentum, right? So anytime the momentum starts to drop, that's when those like the behaviors kind of start, where they kind of start to wander or start to be tempted to talk, but having the momentum go, having the momentum, keeping things up, keeping the pace up was really, really helpful. And I found that the students really, really loved the art games. They would just ask for it all the time. And I feel that this time really emphasized relevancy and relationships with students. I did 1 site visit and met 1/3 of those students. So 2/3 of those students never saw me in person. And I never had that opportunity to really establish those relationships. The school asked specials to lead a closing circle, and I jumped on it right away because I knew, like, this is the opportunity to establish some relationships with some students. And I did, and I found that those students were the ones most likely to come to live studio, most likely to hand in, to be more participatory in terms of handing in any artwork that they do.
Cool. Thanks, Al. Hannah, go for it.
Yeah, I noticed in the chat, Marilyn Rodriguez talked about how it can be really stressful for parents. And I think that's something that I quickly had to learn how to navigate and support. Because not only are we supporting all of our all of our students that need help, but we also need to support our parents. And my school specifically, we do a lot of praise specific like compliments and like making sure that, like, when kids are doing things that we love, to like call that out. And I found myself like using that a lot with my parents, and like recognizing like what you're dealing with right now is nothing that you would have ever expected, and, you know, validating that experience, and just let them know that, like, what you can get done is okay. Cause I just kept this in my head. I'm like, the last thing I want is for art to be stressful for my kids and for their parents, right? Like, I want them to feel good about what they're doing. And I feel like I just kept praising. I was like, thank you for, you know, sending me this email. Thank you for communicating with me. Thank you for, like, helping your kid do this project. And I think that really helped, because before that point, I hadn't really like had a lot of interactions with my parents. So I just thank you for Marilyn for pointing that out, because that was like a huge shift for me. Which was good to develop those relationships.
Great, thanks, Hannah. cool. I'm going to move on to our next question. So what, half of you are done teaching for the school year, and the other half of you are still teaching for one more week. But I think it's a great moment to say, there are things that are still really challenging, and we'll continue. We know that this is a tool in our toolbox and not the new toolbox that we're using, hopefully moving forward. It might be for a little bit longer, but what are some of the challenges you've run into? Sarah, would you mind just jumping in there on that first one?
Did you say me? You cut out briefly.
Yes. Okay. Sarah,
please. Still challenging. I know probably with a lot of people, their districts are talking about kind of generic plans of how to move forward. And I'm finding still challenging is really with my really young students who are very, very low learning, of really still being able to work with them in an online format. And like, I'm struggling to really still, even after 3 months, how to really work with my life skills students who are coming into first grade, when they usually, like, we spend the first few months of really working one-on-one and sitting next to each other and working on touching things and finding things, and how much that requires being in the same space, and how am I going to solve this problem of not being able to sit next to them and look at them and watch their body language, because they aren't always verbal. And sometimes it requires me knowing what their patterns are and what their body language is to really understand what they're trying to make and trying to communicate with me. And kind of concern for how in the future, I know my district is talking a lot about a hybrid plan of online and in person, and how am I going to connect if I have supplies at school, but then they don't have the same, how is that hybrid really going to work for the art room? And how can I make this work for myself with what I've learned over the past 3 months? Currently my thoughts are, I really like how online I created a website for myself, because the platform our district wanted to use does not work for any visual learner at all. But so creating a website where it was an easy flow that you could easily see and follow and see all of the steps and the end result and what everyone was doing, and then the internet can save that and someone can go back and access that again if they wanted to try it again at home, or if they wanted to explore it in a new way at another time.
That's great. Thank you. Allie, any thoughts on
that? Not being with the students is definitely the most challenging. And the past several weeks, whenever somebody asks me, how's it going? I would say, I really miss my students. As I mentioned, I keep emphasizing that art is a process. There's a product that's evidence of the process, but being with students and getting to ask them questions and witnessing this process, it helps me learn what kind of learner they are. And then that'll influence what activities I would be supplying for them. So that's been difficult. And yes, I have Seesaw as a platform to kind of mitigate that, but it's still not enough. It really doesn't replace the real life, real time. That's the gift that the present experience gives for me personally as a teacher. And then also getting to just like these organic questions. And that was a big issue that I found in the live studio classes. Whenever a student has a question, it would be in the middle of me giving instruction. And then one thing that really bothers me is telling a student, okay, wait, or like, hold on. And yes, it must happen even in the IRL classroom, but it's really difficult online, especially because, again, as I said, like the momentum needs to keep going. And if a question comes up, it's a very valid question, majority of the time. And I have to kind of like put that aside to try and keep the momentum going. But then that question will have another student ask another question. And So that was the challenge, just keeping that momentum, but then also validating the students' questions and where they are in their individual process.
Sorry about that. I'm jumping forward by accident. Kat and Hannah, I still wanted to offer you an opportunity to talk about the challenges. Go ahead, Kat.
I think Al and Hannah definitely touched on this, as well as the idea of like being in the classroom and the fact that we're virtual, we miss a lot, right? Like, I think Sarah, I think this was you who said this, I'm sorry, who we're forgetting like their movements, right? Like how they're reacting in that space. And something I realized is and the challenge for me that I'm still working on is how do we normalize this form of communication? How are we, when we're in the classroom and we see a student struggling, yes, you want them to kind of, give them a moment to problem solve, see what they do. But in the virtual setting, we can't see that. And because we can't see that, we don't know when it's layering, that idea of like missing the step is layering on top of our students over and over. When we catch it, they're so far behind. And so I think something that has been challenging and slowly getting better as we're practicing this virtual teaching is how do we normalize the communication from our students to us via email? How can that be a space where it's not so formal, right? How can they just check in with us and that be okay and have them feel comfortable doing that? I know a couple students in my classes in real life, right? Like they already have a little bit of anxiety speaking to teachers. And so when we put that and say, okay, we'll now create an email to formally send to a teacher to say you need help, like that can be very stressful for them. And I'm sure they don't want to go to their parents. I teach high school boys mainly. And so they don't want to go to their parents and drag them in. There's so many layers to this. And I'm sure they're thinking about it as well. So how do we normalize that, an email can be very simple. It doesn't have to be this nerve-wracking thing. That a parent emailing us doesn't have to be this nerve-wracking thing. And so something that I'm still trying to figure out is, is there a platform, a separate platform we can offer our students? Is there, can we offer just like an office hour outside from like an evening when parents are done their work as well, for them to just pop on and say, hey, my students had a quick question. If they're too nervous to ask the question, all this stuff is just running through my head. But ideally, this idea of like challenges, how do we normalize communication in this setting?
Thanks, Kat. And Hannah?
Yeah, so my biggest challenge, and I think this has been pretty consistent within the world of special education, is really thinking about equity and accessibility. We're using Google Classroom as a platform, and I'm trying to be very aware of like, okay, who are my non-readers? Who are my visual learners? And so when I create something, I try to make sure I have, written instructions. I have visual because I'm talking and I'm audibly giving instructions, and then I always add a PowerPoint to reiterate those. But I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I hit that send button and like all of that stuff like goes out into the void, and I have no idea whether or not it's being digested well. And it's been something that I've been grappling with a lot. Like, how do I make this accessible? And like, my youngest students, like, how do I teach them how to use Google Classroom where they don't need to have a parent? And, we went from having like no experience with Google Classroom to like all of our teachers, all of our kids. So that was just like our teachers are struggling with this as well. So it's just been a thing that I've been thinking about, and I'm thinking about like, when we move into the fall, how do I make this more accessible when we didn't have the opportunity to even teach our kids how to use it? So, accessibility and equity a lot is on my mind.
Yeah, I was listening to or talking with a few folks from the deaf and hard of hearing community, and the captions for Zoom and Google Classroom are not great. They're just, I apologize. Like, it's really tricky to find a good quality platform where live captioning is done well. And so I just want to pause and acknowledge that might even be going on for someone who's attending our webinar right now. So hopefully technology will continue to improve. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually going to combine the last two questions so that we can have some time with our colleagues in the attendee world who are here. And we're going to ask two things. We're going to ask, what tools do you think you'll continue to use, even if you're back in the classroom or at some point when you are, hopefully? And then just other reflections that you've had along the way, just in general. And I'm going to start with Sarah to answer either of those questions if you want to. Okay.
So in the future, I'm really looking forward to actually kind of, this process has like forced me to almost flip my classroom and really use technology to my advantage when I was very hesitant to before, because I am terrible at technology. But this has forced me to flip it. It's forced me to show more of my flaws and kind of allow my students to see that I am terrible at technology and the videos I'm making are the best of my ability. And it's fine. It's fine. We're still getting the information across. They can have a chuckle at their teacher while also still getting the information that they need. Lauren, can you remind me what the other question was?
So we're doing just general reflections or tools that you're going to keep and carry on into the classroom. And you can answer both or just one of those if you want to.
Yeah, I think the biggest is also still finding multiple ways to show my students' work that the things that they are sending to me, they are so proud of. And when we are in person, everyone knows it takes forever to hang up artwork, especially if I have over almost 700 students, and it takes me forever to post work. But online, it's almost easier to be able to constantly be posting what kids are sending you and having it so that anyone can be looking at it. And I'm kind of moving forward, hoping to be able to, like Kat said, and other people develop it so that there can be like a continuous virtual show that students can go back and reflect on and communicate with each other about what they're making.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about the difference between hanging versus posting and how, that's good to recognize. Al, your thoughts on either of those?
I think I would definitely piggybacking off what Sarah's saying, utilize all these various different platforms to maintain almost like a class portfolio. This is something that we can just look at anytime we want to. Students can look back at their work and their peers' work whenever they want to. And there's also the opportunity to use like video and audio to also talk about their work, so that it using technology to really bridge that gap between the classroom and home and keeping things relevant. And then that's the way to also point out artistic behavior and how artistic behavior arises not just in the art room, but it happens in the math room and reading and writing at home when you're cooking and all of those avenues. Trying to remember the last, sorry, I'm pulling up my notes. And then reflecting on my home has become my studio, my classroom, and my office at the same time. And for me, it's just like reestablishing those boundaries and understanding like, yes, I am a teacher and I'm also a human, and there is so much process. So like maintaining time for myself to process, because maintaining my health means that I can be an effective educator, and being able to hold whatever emotions and situations my students and their families are going to, I can best support them if I take care of myself as well. And that means reestablishing those boundaries and taking time to reflect on what's happening, and not just in the greater world, but then also with my lessons. Another challenge that I had thought of was not being in the classroom with my students means I'm lacking that immediate feedback, right? It's not just their questionings. It's also just like visually, like seeing, oh, you are not getting this. I can just see it by the look on your face, your body language, or how you're starting something. And we would be able to bring in a tool that will help that student or the entire group if needed. And that's really lacking with the online classroom, is not having that immediate feedback. And I think that having a virtual platform can start to solve that. And if we do go back to the classroom, that is another avenue for students to give their feedback or have their questions. Somebody else had mentioned that before. So that's something I think I would keep.
And I'm going to do Alex, Sam, and then Hannah. Go ahead, Alex.
So some things that I definitely plan on using in the future. To piggyback off of Sarah, I really love the idea of creating a virtual gallery, and I definitely plan on using that in the future. Of course, I'll have my annual in-person art show, assuming that's possible. But I really liked being able to send out that virtual gallery to not just other students, but to parents and to like some of the other faculty in the building who might not necessarily know what's going on down in the art room. So that was really nice to be able to send that out to people who might not be able to necessarily make it out to my usual art show as well. And I also think using virtual critique has been pretty effective too. Like I said before, like my very anxious students who don't like speaking in the classroom, giving them that virtual platform to be able to express themselves in a way that they might not normally be comfortable has been really successful. And I've seen a little bit of an increase in participation from them because they're being given a different means to be able to participate in critique. So I think I'll definitely be using that in the future. And even if I think just giving more opportunity for written critique as well, even if it's in the classroom, will be more effective for those students. Yeah.
Cool. Sam?
I think this idea of a virtual gallery is amazing, and I wish that I could have implemented it sooner. So that sparked something in me. I really miss being in the classroom with my students. I got into teaching because I love teaching kids, right? Like we all did. And we miss teaching kids in person. The virtual platform gives a lot of opportunity for written feedback. I'm doing a lot more introduction, and then they can give me a short 3-2-1 response on, I can see if they're understanding what I'm talking about, which is really great. And they're short and they're quick before we lead into our projects. And they're doing short, quick reflections afterwards. And I'm kind of comparing the two and seeing, what they thought was going to be difficult in the beginning actually was their favorite part of the long-term project, and getting feedback in that way, which I think I'm going to implement a little bit more in my classroom in the future. And I think also implementing tools like Loom, where you can like record yourself over your PowerPoints and materials like that, I'm going to use in the future for students if they need to go back. We use the platform Canvas, same as Alex, and we use it all the time, but now we're using it a lot more intense because we're all online. But giving them the opportunity to go through all the stuff we go through in classrooms with my demonstrations, with video of my demonstrations, with my PowerPoints, with me verbalizing what they should be working on over top of it, could be really helpful when we go back, hopefully, into our classrooms, where if we're blended online and at home, just to support all of my learners and really make it equitable and accessible, as Hannah said beautifully, because I think that's a great way of putting it. So yeah, I think just taking some of the stuff I'm using now and applying it, but also I think what's really important is figuring out a way to get materials to my students. I think in the future, figuring out a way to either send them just a couple little things, or figuring out how I can support them in that way to make stuff at home, that they're not working completely in 2D all the time and working some 3-dimensional in there, is something that I really hope to incorporate in the future.
Great, Sam. Hannah, why don't you close out this panel discussion with some thoughts?
Sam, I totally agree with what you just said. I think, getting my kids materials is a huge thing. I also, as everyone was saying, like not being in the classroom has a lot of disadvantages. And I think, I think a lot about assessment as a way to assess myself. And I'm constantly using that in my classroom. Every class, I always end with an exit circle, where we like touch base on like what happened in class, what do you want to work on? Or like, I usually always have a question that kind of allows me to assess where everyone is at. And especially since I'm not allowed to do any live instruction, I've lost a lot of that. So I feel like, I really need to figure out how to restructure what assessment looks like online, so that I can get that feedback from kids, because they're not the most typey, they love to talk face to face. So how do I do that when I'm not able to get that direct thing? So that's been on my mind, and I'm excited to kind of see how that works. I'm also loving, as well as everyone else, the idea of like online portfolios and things. I think that I'll be ending my school year with a nice portfolio for everyone, just to celebrate everyone's work. So thank you, Lauren.
That's amazing. Thank you all so much for sharing. So we're this last little chunk of time that we're going to have together. I'm going to bring Laura back in to help us, and I'm going to tell my panelists to open up their chat box so we can see some things. But we wanted to you all are experiencing things too out in the field, and so we just wanted to hear from you. And so we're asking questions. What are some of your successes so far? Maybe even a fun story about a moment or with a child, or a moment with a group of folks. What has surprised you about the online experience? Maybe you went in like me, really anxious, and then found some really lovely things that popped in along the way. And what are you all considering we should think about as we move forward? So you can put in those thoughts, and Laura will read those out loud for us, and the panelists will kind of listen and engage along the way.
And just want to say, while you all are thinking about questions, if anyone is interested in receiving Act 48 credit hours, I just put the link in the chat box as well. So there's a quick form to fill out. So again, while folks are thinking, I know you've all talked a little bit about this already, but there was a question a little earlier on about how to motivate parents, especially when everyone is so burned out on pretty much every experience that we're all having. So have you had any, successes, surprising or not, in motivating the parents that you work with?
And panelists, why don't you raise your hand if you want to answer? And of course, our attendees, please answer in the chat box too, and we'll read those out loud. Laura, are you seeing the one from Maryland?
Yes.
Okay.
So from Marilyn Rodriguez, this was successful for this time. They did a podcast with kids.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome. A platform for kids' voices to be heard.
That's awesome. We haven't even talked about podcasts.
Yeah, was there any integration of video making or music or anything like that, other forms of art that can go along with visual?
Yeah, I'll just say, while I did not get a chance to implement them, if you are not, if you don't know about the Council for Exceptional Children Division of the Arts, that is essentially, the National Art Education Association has our art ed crew. We have interest groups like the Special Needs and Art Education group and the Disability Studies group. CEC Darts is where the special ed folks go to hang out, and within that is a division of the arts. So that includes visual and performing arts. It's a great website to go to get resources there. And also their Facebook and Instagram account share videos of performances and things like that. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're suggesting, Laura, but it's just an extra resource to add on there.
Yeah, that's great.
Cool. Oh, I see other folks posting. Great. Go ahead, Laura.
All right. So from Mayaris Walker, Being forced to develop technical skills because I get very confused with tech. Same. I know they were successful because I am now tackling doing videos and editing so I can do my own online lessons. I was surprised by some of the creativity of my students as they themselves were.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And Laura Marie Durr. I've been pleasantly surprised by most of my juniors. We left the building in the midst of 3 long-term assignments that were all very prompt-based. Some students were a bit behind on this. The big goal was to teach students time management and planning. Despite this, once we were home, students really got focused and worked to complete 3 really personal and meaningful pieces.
That's amazing. Yeah, even just, I mean, in my own daughter who's 9, she didn't really talk about the pandemic for a while, even though we really tried to as much as we could as a family. But these little drawings started popping up with little like heads and bubbles that said, "Please go away, pandemic," or "Be gone by summer." Just like these little expressions. And so, Laura, I would imagine starting some experience on site at the school and like allowing that to transition online, however it manifested itself, must have been life-giving in the process as well. And that's really amazing. Yeah.
Looks like from Claire Butler, one way that I connect with my parents and students was through Facebook. A group of parents encouraged me to start a group. They share photos and I share feedback. I also share lessons and videos.
That's super cool. We did that with our Saturday Special Needs and Art Education course, actually. The course that we host on Saturdays for children with diverse learning needs and abilities, they were posting their information in the Facebook group. That's such a wonderful idea, and we haven't mentioned that yet. Thanks, Claire.
Looks like Marilyn Rodriguez also did journaling and cell phone classes. And some parents would take classes with the kids.
Yeah.
So be on the Zoom as well, which I'm sure you all saw a lot.
I'm seeing a lot of nods on that one from our panelists. Yeah. Go ahead, Al. Oops. Sorry, I accidentally muted you back. Go ahead, Al.
I also saw older siblings jumping in on the live classes, and then were what I saw submitted through Seesaw. So I thought that was really sweet. I'm sure part of it was also, there's something you both can do together. However, like the older student is old enough to be like, I don't want to. So the fact that they were there for live studio, and also sometimes their closing circle was really fun. And I got to know their siblings as well. So that was like another level of getting to know these students. I don't think I really would have had the opportunity for that to happen as quickly without the virtual platform. Yeah.
Kat, did you have your hand up? No. Yeah. Nope.
I did not, but I'm actually thinking of this idea of getting parents to support their students at home. And Al, I think you just touched on it in terms of how do we get parents to be doing the work with our kids, kind of subconsciously. Because again, we don't want to pile things on parents as well. Something that I did with my middle schoolers, I teach high school and middle school, primarily high school. But I borrowed a lot from Kari Smith's book, Being an Explorer of the World. And one of the lessons that she says we can do is go outside, find a scent, and follow that scent. And, we're all taking walks right now outside. So if that was the art experience for the week, take a walk with your parents, how do we get them involved knowing that these are the lessons we're doing? And I'm all about inceptioning my way, art into the house some way. And even sometimes just into my own students' head. So I think Kari Smith's book is an amazing resource for people who want to do something like that.
Cool. Laura, I can also see that Laura Marie Durr responded to her lesson earlier. So maybe start back from there.
So I think the earlier comment was about the juniors. So for the sophomores, they had an open-ended figures in space prompt prior to us leaving. Their plans before we left were cliche, to say the least. Most of them shifted once we were home and the pieces became so much cooler. Some were really sad, but all were powerful and timely.
Yeah. There's that evidence.
Yeah. And then Marilyn Rodriguez was asking if anyone is familiar with Class Dojo as a platform.
I am as a parent, and it was used primarily by the teacher to communicate with us, but we were doing most of our online, or Shirley, our daughter, was doing most of our own learning through Google Classroom. Class Dojo actually, while it was used more prevalently when they were on campus, kind of became almost obsolete, and it's used once we transitioned to Google Classroom. So I'll just add that. Anyone else using it before in their own classroom that still used it? Nope. Okay. So we got, at least in this crew, that's how that turned out. Yeah. All right. And Liz, go ahead, Laura.
Yeah, it looks like you all are not alone in thinking about collaborating with families. Long is saying if virtual learning continues into the fall, I want to focus some of the learning to include family collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
Claire Butler did a lesson called 100 Steps. You take 100 steps, and when you get to 100, you stop and take a photo or sit and draw what you see.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a good one.
Also a scavenger hunt activity from Marilyn Rodriguez.
Carol, can you clarify the what platform question? Maybe it's referencing something earlier. It's okay to chat, add that to the chat if you want to. Well, maybe while we wait for that to pop up, do you want to read Laura?
So Laura is asking if anyone has plans for what to include in a supply kit for students in the fall if we are remote. Looking forward, what will they need? What can we provide them with?
Yeah. Maybe I'll start with one panelist. What's the tool you wish they had most right now? You can raise your hand, or you can unmute yourself if you want to.
Lauren, can you repeat that question? I'm sorry.
Laura is asking, like, what if you were going to create a toolkit to send home to kids in the fall because we're not on site? What are some suggestions for what we would include in that remote learning art kit? And I said it might be interesting even to hear what you are wishing your students had right now. That might be a good place to start. So maybe just a few materials you're like, oh, I really wish they had paint at home. Or go ahead, Al.
Large paper. Even larger than 11.5 by 17. There were a couple activities that I had where I would like them to work bigger, and that's what I encouraged. But I also stress, like, if you don't have anything bigger than 8.5 by 11, this is fine. This is how we can accommodate for that. But I really like to emphasize, like, using your whole body, especially for this age group. So yeah, large paper.
Large paper.
I'm a high school ceramics teacher.
Oh, so, yeah, that's tough.
I can barely say from my cohort of teachers at my school that ceramics has been hit. We had to change a lot around. And I can't have my kids have clay at home. They don't have the correct ventilation. They don't have a kiln. It's just not going to work. So I've been digging a lot into clays that are air dry, clays that are safe, but also they're very expensive, this type of air dry clay. So, in my classroom this year, we tried baking, like clay, oven baking clay. So I'm trying to figure this out. But if someone brilliantly just discovers this clay body that's available, that's something I would really love to put in a
totally.
I did find, speaking of cat, I wish my kids had clay, something to mush with their hands, because even when they're in class with me, they're building their hand muscles is always such a struggle. And I didn't come across any students who tried it. I just kind of put it in my like extras folder, like if you need an activity to do. And it was like, it was a recipe for homemade air dry clay.
Oh.
And it didn't involve glue. It was just like, I'd have to look it up, but it involved only like 3 ingredients and super easy to do. But yeah, paint and clay.
Mm-hmm.
And as time went on and kids wanted to work bigger, I was noticing that some of them were getting really interesting. Like Al, what you were saying, I had kids submit, they had just like taken all the boxes of stuff and laid them out flat on their driveway and were just like going to town. And I was like, awesome, great.
So great. Laura, do you want to read off just a few more of these in the chat that I've been scrolling down? I think we left off with Marilyn's resources.
Yeah, the resources book with the Friendly app and website. Is that the name of an app, or is that a reference to like user-friendly apps?
I'm not sure. We'll have to let Marilyn answer that. I know that it could be in a reference to the file that we're creating. Oh, can we put these together for kids? Yeah. So, this body of folks, these panels are going to pull together a file that will share of the resources that we've shared today. And certainly if you want to email me anything directly, we can put that in there. Marilyn might also be speaking to like sending stuff home to families of what apps are available to them and books. Yes. Okay, great. Good. I'm glad we worked that out. And the paint sticks are, they're super fun. They're really like fluid and lovely. Thanks for adding that, Marilyn. Okay, go ahead, Laura. Sorry, I kind of took over there for a minute.
Oh, that's fine. Claire is wondering if panelists or attendees that have websites or blogs would be willing to share or do a lesson plan exchange.
Everybody raise their hand who has a website right now or an Instagram account for their classroom. There you go. Okay, so we will create that list and add it to that file. Alex, I see your hand up. You want to add something?
I was just going to say, a lot of my choice boards, I created, even though I use Canvas, I have some Google Docs where on Canvas, the kids can click a link. There's just kind of, I can share what this looks like for me, but my choice boards are basically just an image of like a possible example, a list of the materials they might need to make that project. So that way they know right off the bat, I can't do this project because I don't have these materials. And just like the name of a project and a link to directions. And then the link to the directions goes to a Google Doc that has a much more detailed explanation of the assignment, an introduction video, YouTube resources, all sorts of other stuff, questions for their artist statements. So I'd be more than happy to share out those lessons that I've been using just from the choice boards. And I can make that available for people if you're interested in some of the lessons that I've been making.
That's super generous of you, Alex. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah. There's a few, if you're on social media, there are some really amazing Facebook groups going on that are kind of crowdsourcing loads of lessons, especially in the beginning. It was just, the sharing in our community is just beyond, like, it's just so amazing. And so they are out there. I'll try to pull a few of those links as well to put into our shared file. Cool. Laura, do you want to go back to Marilyn there?
Let's see. So Marilyn is using brown paper bags as well. Definitely an easy to find material, found at home, and good for painting.
Cool. Yeah. Thinking of those durable materials we have at home to work on already is really helpful. Cool. I'm going to transition us into attendees. Please continue to share your successes. We want to see them kind of rolling along the way here. I guess just any final questions in these last few minutes here from our lovely. Oh, Alex has a question. Go for it.
It's actually not a question. I saw somewhere in the chat that someone mentioned doing like scavenger hunts with families.
Yes.
And our school has been using this amazing free application called Goose Chase, where you can make a scavenger hunt and then all the kids have to do is download the app and they can participate in the scavenger hunt. And the scavenger hunt that you can make, you can assign like point values to different things in the scavenger hunt. And then it becomes like a game for families. And we actually did that over our like spring break for the kids. And we had this big scavenger hunt and we had like a teacher one where the teachers competed and we had a student one where the students and families by grade level competed. And it was really successful and the kids had a lot of fun doing it.
Cool. That's super cool. That's great. I'm seeing Susan Durkin. Hey, Susan, posting her recipe for that homemade dough or clay, and the goose chase for it's the AENJAC conference, I think, Laura. But that's really amazing. Cool. Great.
Oh, another point is that it might be useful to include tips on how to develop relationships with new students. And, coming into the fall, I assume you all are going to have some new students coming in. Laura's going to have all new freshmen. So,
yeah, absolutely. I feel like I've seen a few articles out about that, just like how to create community in your classroom. But I'll speak from the higher ed position. We have new grad students coming in this summer who typically are on site and together. They now will not meet each other in person for another year, which is really wild to me. I'm thinking a lot about just getting to know them better and creating community, and also including them in this community that's already been kind of moving forward so far. Another thing I'll add is that our special topics and curriculum class, we always work with a population of adults who have diverse learning needs and abilities from the Center for Creative Work, Spark, and BCDS. And we're going to try doing it online this year. So we're going to learn some stuff with some adults who identify as being disabled. I just felt like it'd be better for our graduate students to try some stuff out rather than just reading articles about it all summer. So we will let you know how that goes. I think it's going to be really fun, really exciting. Cool. Yeah. Well, I think that I'm going to keep us on time here and just say that we're just so grateful for you all being here. It has been a wild season of online learning, especially in the field of art and education. If you are on Facebook, you can join and if you're an art education alum of MORE, we have a specific private Facebook group where we continue to share some of these resources, or we post jobs up there if you're looking for new work. And then if you're on Instagram, MORE Art Ed is where you can follow us there. So I just want to thank the panelists and Lynne Horoschak and Laura and Liz for supporting us in this process. And we just hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for joining us today.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.